Professor Bodei has studied in Pisa and has continued his studies in several German institutes, in Tübingen, Heidelberg and Bochum. He has had the pleasure of studying together with Ernest Bloch, Eugen Fink, Karl Löwit and Dieter Henrich. For those who study philosophy, each one of these names is a tradition, a philosophical tradition of great power. Professor Bodei has got a diploma from the Normale in Pisa, so he's been a pupil of the Institute hosting us today. I have also taught here. Sure, I'm going to say that. I was just starting with your education, and then I will talk about your career. So, Professor Bodei has been visiting professor in Cambridge, Ottawa, New York, Toronto, Girona and Mexico City, as well as UCLA, Los Angeles. He has held conferences in many European, American and Australian universities, and since 2006 he has a chair in philosophy at UCLA. He has taught for a long time history of philosophy and aesthetics at the Normale and at the University of Pisa. Professor Bodei is member of the International Advisory Board of the European Institute of Design, and since 2015 he's been corresponding member of the Lincei Academia for Philosophical, Moral and Historical Sciences. Now I should start mentioning your publications, but maybe we haven't got enough time for that. Let me just mention the fact that Professor Bodei has focused on classical philosophy and German idealism, and has published a monograph that has made history in the tradition of the studies on Hegel in Italy. Sistema and Epoca in Hegel. I believe Rosella will expand on this later on. I have decided to zip all the research work that I'm carrying out in this field in such a way as to provide you with an overview, taking the fast track, i.e., I will talk about a long period of time that will bring us to the relationship with robotics. And I will provide you with lyophilized concepts that you will then allow to re-expand in the water of your experience. I will analyze 3 issues and 3 periods of time. The idea of mechanics, of machines and their transformation from the Hellenistic world up to Galileo's time, then from Galileo's time to the Industrial Revolution, with all its consequences, and then the present time of automation. Well, let me start with the term machine. Mechane in ancient Greek means ingenuity, because people could not understand how a simple machine such as a lever could allow a person to lift huge weights with little effort. Therefore, mechanics. And I have to say that when the Romans conquered Taranto, the term mechane turned into machina and then machina in Latin with CH. So the ancient tradition had transformed machines, also given the presence of high numbers of slaves, had transformed machines into thaumasia, i.e. something that causes surprise and wonder, such as a pneumatic opening by means of hot compressed air of the doors of the temples. Or again, heroes' machines that you could find in the past in the labs of physics in the lyceums. Or again, like Ctesibio's chair. Ctesibio was the son of a barber, and to help his father in his job, he had invented an armchair, a pneumatic one like the one in the film The Great Dictator, an armchair that could go up and down Or again, like Liutprand of Cremona, who was sent by the Lombards to the court in Byzantium. Liutprand noticed that the Basileus was sitting very high on a pneumatic chair, and he did not speak. The Logothete, the prime minister, spoke for him, and there was also a bronze lion that could be moved by means of pneumatic solutions. The lion was roaring and moving the tail, and there was also a beautiful tree with silver birds singing. Being a Lombard, Liutprand thought that he was not impressed by the people of Byzantium. However, the watermill that was developed in the 1st century BC in Rome was the only practical machine, together with siege machines, catapults built with horses and oxes' tendons, able to concentrate force to launch projectiles. Both theoretically and philosophically, Aristotle was the one, even though for a long time we used to think that credit should go to Strato of Lampsacus, but it was Aristotle who wrote Les Questioni Meccaniche. Galileo held courses at the Pisa University before moving to Padua, where he was offered a much higher fee than in Pisa. Aristotle claimed that machines are against nature, unlike medicine that supports and favors natural healing processes. Machines are a sophistic trick so that the human being that is weaker tricks nature, which is stronger, forcing nature to do what he or she wants, just like a sophist uses specious sentences that can trick the listener. Well, in the same way, claims Aristotle, you can compare the human being to Odysseus, the ingenious one, who is able to blind Polyphemo, i.e. the powerful but rough nature, so that Ulysses wins in the end. So Aristotle claims when nature supports us, we just follow it. When nature is against us, we trick it. It is a tradition that will come back with Francis Bacon in the 17th century, with nature that has to be tortured to confess its secrets. It is an inquisitory method, because if you leave nature free, nature won't unveil what we need to understand. There was a very long period that brings us to the Renaissance. Leonardo used to build machines like these. The Pratolino Villa by Buontalenti, unfortunately nothing is left today, had curious mechanisms. You had Fame blowing a trumpet. There was a snow biting an apple. There was a farmer hoeing the earth. And during this period in Nuremberg, which has then become the city of toys, an imperial eagle was built that could fly like Archimedes' dove in the 4th century by means of compressed air and a valve. What does Galileo do? As you can see, I'm proceeding very fast. Later on, if we have time, you can ask me precise questions and I can be more analytical. Galileo realizes that it is impossible to trick nature, that nature has to be followed, and we must adapt to natural laws. In his lectures, held in Pisa first and in Padua later in 1597 and in 1604, the text of these lectures was published by Mersenne. Galileo's Mechanics were published about 30 years later. And Galileo explains that mechanics that used to be despised in the past, you probably remember the division between liberal and mechanical arts, the latter being despised, or think about the betrothed, Friar Cristoforo meeting the nobleman, who tells him, "Pass on, vile mechanic, or I will soon settle matters with my sword." Well, Galileo's solution transforms mechanics from a despised art. Even Archimedes despised mechanics, according to Cicero. In Archimedes' tomb, there was a representation of the theorem between the relationship between the cone and the sphere, the cone having a base which is identical to the diameter of the sphere. So apparently, Archimedes was ashamed of his mechanical arts, including the ones mentioned by Plutarch, the capability of burning the sails of Roman ships in 212, concentrating the light through a lens. For Galileo, the famous issues of simple machines such as the wedge that can fracture tree trunks and rocks, or like Aristotle tells us, the nutcracker, 2 levers, tooth extraction tongues, 2 levers again. Well, Galileo believes that there is no trick. Think about the lever again. If you multiply force by distance and speed, and you also consider the application, you obtain a formula which is rational. Nobody would say today that arithmetics has to be named rational arithmetics. However, in the past, mechanics was not considered to be rational. So today, our engineers have to sit through the exam of rational mechanics in the universities. But where is the ingenuity? Well, it is an economical ingenuity. Machines replace horses, for instance. In other words, they provide for the use of forces that have no cost, such as the wind or the rain. And these forces can be applied to elements that can capture them, like the sails of a ship, or energy from falling water. Modern industry has developed in the proximity of energy sources. Think about Biella. This is an area where wool garments are produced. Well, there has been a very important transformation that is related to the capability of transporting energy in the form of electricity. This has allowed manufacturing sites to be developed far away from energy sources, such as water or coal in the UK, for instance, that forced people to live in areas that were not positive for their health. Well, with Galileo, the strength of a horse or whichever animal running around the grinding stone, a mule, for instance, is overcome by a machine. So the machine is ingenious because it costs very little. With Galileo, the civilization of machines was born, and we're talking of machines that are very precise. They can be designed knowing how they will work. Approximately 100 years later, 100 years and a few decades later, machines had a very fast development, leading to the Industrial Revolution. You all know very well that Watt's steam machine was initially developed to remove water from mines in order to be able to dig into greater depths without the risk of miners drowning because of the perforation of water reservoirs. But what happens to machines? I mean, Watt's steam machine in 1784 was actually applied to looms, and mechanical looms were developed in 1801. And let me pinpoint that the Industrial Revolution started in the textile industry. The looms were equipped with Jacquard's perforated cards, the pioneers of computers, and the result of the Industrial Revolution was the destruction of the Indian economy, where only manual looms were available. And, as Adam Smith observed in his publication The Wealth of Nations, with the well-known history of the pin factory, while prior to the Industrial Revolution and the division of tasks at work, a maximum of 20 pins could be produced in the factory each day, splitting the production process, the drawing of the metal, the cutting, the finishing operations. It became possible in 1776 to produce 48,000 pins a day. This is very important because there are some aspects that we sometimes do not realize. Conversely, after Ludism, which I'm going to explain to you in a minute, the well-known Swiss economist Mandi, who used to spend most of his time in Pêche, in his book Principes d'économie politique, dating 1817, the industrial society is producing a gap that is becoming larger and larger. It is the gap between overproduction and underconsumption. In other words, industries produce too much, and the products cannot be absorbed by individuals who do not have a sufficient income to buy them. Therefore, industries, given their overproduction, dismissed workers and reduced their production time, so much so that the Luddists, these British workers, inspired by an imaginary net Luddle, an individual who supposedly had smashed a loom about 10 years before, well, these workers started destroying all mechanical looms to protect all those who used to knit stockings manually or who used manual looms, and they smashed hundreds of looms. This was a big movement, so much so that the government had to send the army. Hundreds of people were killed and death penalty was given to those who smashed mechanical looms. Lord Byron, the Democrat, gave a very lively speech. Try to understand them. This system cannot go on like this, he claimed. So the whole period of the Industrial Revolution, or at least the first 100 years, starting from Watt's steam machine up to the 1860s and 1870s, well, there's a terrible period, as we can read in Dickens' novels or in the photographs of miserable London by Mayhew. Overproduction and underconsumption, this was something terrible. Consumerism came to the rescue. Bastiat and some other French economists, despised by Marx, reflected on the fact that if there was overproduction and underconsumption, it was necessary to support consumption. In the 1840s, they advocated more consumption, and the practical result was the first supermarket that opened up in Rue de Sèvres in 1852. You can still see the first supermarket called Au Bon Marché. And this had a positive effect. Number one, because in the supermarket prices were fixed. No bargaining like in the past. It was possible to pay in installments. You could bring back the goods you didn't need, and so on and so forth. In Bonheur de Dame, Zolansky in 1884 describes the fact that supermarkets destroy small shops. Zolansky claims that supermarkets democratize luxury because people can buy things in installments. In 1902, Mr. Foucault, and this is not the inventor of the pendulum, neither the philosopher. This Mr. Foucault was a glassmaker who made huge sheets of glass that would not crack because of temperature change. In the past, as you probably know, glass was inserted in a lead or iron structure. Otherwise, large glass surfaces would crack. In 1945, supermarkets were equipped with trolleys, so you just go in to buy razor blades and you come out with a full trolley. In 1959, and sometimes this is under-evaluated, but this is something that affects your life. Well, in 1959, Patrick McNamara invented the credit card, named Diners. It was called Diners because it was a credit card for the customers of Patrick McNamara's restaurants. But then he realized that this credit card could be used everywhere. So consumption buffered the crisis of the industrial society. Today, we have a problem with consumerism. Not in moralistic terms, because if you don't consume, you don't produce. And if you don't produce, our system will collapse. So Latouche and others can go on talking about frugal abundance or about the end of capitalism. Like a colleague of mine claims, capitalism has very little time remains for capitalism. While it took centuries to develop, it will take time to change. But let me now address the main topic of my presentation. I still have 12 minutes, so I should make it, providing you with lyophilized concepts, as I said at the beginning. So how comes that these machines that do work, because we have designed them and we have workers checking that they are operational, but how comes that these machines are transformed into automatic machines? Everything started with Pascal's calculating machine. But it is Leibniz's calculating machine that is particularly important. The latest model was finished in 1684. Pascal's machine could make additions and subtractions, but Leibniz machines can make all four operations. But Leibniz recognizes the so-called deaf thoughts, the unconscious thoughts that had already been hypothesized by Abbot Lamy, These are unconscious thoughts, deaf thoughts. But there are also blind thoughts, the ones that led to the computing machine. And this was a big theoretical intuition by Leibniz. I mean, if you close your eyes and you imagine a triangle, a pentagon, or a square, it is very easy. But if you try to imagine a more complex geometrical figure, such as a killiagon with 1,000 sides, well, this is impossible, but we understand what this means. It's like algebra. A plus B, A can be any number, and B can be any number. We do not represent anything, and these are the blind thoughts that do not correspond to any image. Leibniz developed the idea of a calculation which is rational, but can be carried out by machines, because machines have no conscience. So this is the evolution from babyage to both algebra and so on and so forth up to present time, with an add-on that denies what the first president of IBM claimed. He said in 1947, "In the world there won't be more than 5 or 6 calculators." Well, with the tiny little machine like this one, we can today replace twice the power of the Knute's huge calculator that used to take up 3 whole rooms with perforated cards and so on and so forth. The problem that is re-emerging, and I'm gradually moving towards the end of my presentation, so the problem that is emerging again in industrial transformation, and in other fields as well, resides in the fact that automation does no longer need an operator. We have moved from the Taylor-Ford model, i.e. the conveyor belt. And let me tell you this because it is interesting. The conveyor belt was derived from the disassembling line in Chicago. Pig meat was processed, and as you all know very well, you don't throw anything away of the pig because also brushes can be made and so on and so forth. So Mr. Taylor developed the conveyor belt, the assembly line. Warehouses were empty because they imposed the product that everybody bought. Remember Henry Ford saying, "Buy the T model, any color you like, provided it is black." So what is the price that we had to pay for this? The price was that only your body was involved with the few repetitive, boring movements. Simon Weil, who worked at Remo, used to say that your thoughts were drained. They withdrew in front of the machine just like flesh in front of a scalpel. A permanent job, full employment, corresponded to the disappearing of your soul in the machine, the ghost in the machine. I'm not talking about Toyotism and all what happened after 1966 with the emphasis on consumers through advertising, just-in-time production, lean production. I mean, this is a system that relies on consumers, hence the flood of advertising. Well, today robots are different. Old generation robots are blind automatons performing specific tasks, predominantly in the manufacturing sector. But robotics has now permeated society, and this does not only affect blue collars, it also affects white collars, because robots can replace us in many different ways. So the latest generation of computers, and you know, I live in California, so sometimes I visit the production sites. Well, the new computers have a 3D vision, and they are to be connected with the cloud. You know what it means? It means that these computers can not only have access to the huge resources in the cloud, but they can also be upgraded any moment. These are not just learning machines, these are not just expert systems like the ones used for blood testing. Systems that can put together many different parameters. Your blood test with this system is more truthful than the exam any physician could provide you with. I'm not talking of the well-known chess games. Computers play chess against each other. Humans are excluded. Not to mention applications affecting the elite, such as airplane pilots. They have nothing to do anymore. The board computer, the onboard computer, does everything for them. But let me conclude with a couple of examples that do not come from the manufacturing sector. Let's take fast food chains in the United States. They're actually firing all those people who used to work there, students, Mexicans, people who had to make ends meet to survive or to pay for their studies. Well, today there's a computer. This computer can prepare burgers, not like humans do. Humans have to take the meat from the fridge, while the computer grinds the meat, prepares the burger. The computer fries the burger and simultaneously cuts the tomatoes, prepares the salad. Prepare a multi-layer burger with ketchup, mustard. The burger is fried and delivered to the customer on demand. Well, these robots can make 360 burgers an hour. And of course, it is possible to invent other robots that can make 500 an hour. By the end of the year, in California, you've probably heard of the Orange County, when water finally arrived from Colorado. Orange orchards thrived. There is also a film by Polanski about this. So there are many, many oranges in California, and many Hispanics usually work there. Dozens of thousands of people make their living out of this, but there is a 3D vision computer. You show an orange to the computer stores the picture of the orange, and with its 8 arms, like an octopus, collects all the oranges, places them in the boxes, and the oranges are ready to be delivered. So what is going to happen in the future? Well, there are 2 schools of thought. For sure, for an unpredictable period of time, many jobs will be lost. Norbert Wiener, in 1949, said it will be a catastrophe. At that time, he said machines will cause the loss of every possible job. Human work will have no value anymore, not even if provided free of cost. So that's the catastrophic view. Others claim new jobs will emerge, different ones. And some are even happy, claiming computers will work and we will enjoy life. But this is also a problem, because you need people to manufacture computers, to repair them. So how long will all this take? We are confronted with a similar situation that was experienced prior to the first industrial revolution, not because of overproduction and underconsumption, but because we will have to invent other jobs. Apparently, with the aging of the population, caregivers will replace workers in factories. But as you will see, there are machines for medical care, huge machines that can perform surgical operations remotely with a very high degree of precision. So I'm not saying that all physicians will be replaced, but what shall we do with our free time? We will have so much free time. How will we use it without wasting it for our own personal growth? It's a huge problem, because Marx was celebrating the 10-hour working day in 1860. It used to be 15. Today we have 35 hours in France, up to 40 hours in Italy. We have 52 Sundays, 52 Saturdays, 30 bank holidays. This means that approximately 1/3 of the year we're free today. And with these machines, we will have even more free time. What shall we do? How shall we organize our time? And then there is the other issue. How can we maintain a human margin compared to what machines do? So it is not what can machines do like us. The problem is, what more can we do compared to machines? Only time will tell us. Thank you very much.